Okay, we are going to continue the Q&A session with Maria. And, last week was about really a lot of the addiction processing questions. So get it away, Miss Maria.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to pivot a little bit from the addiction process and go into actually questions regarding singles and kind of where they are with my other group. So one of them, they had dated someone before. She thought he had all the stuff she really wanted, and then he broke up with, I don't remember what happened or why, but he broke up with her. And now she's like, she's like, that's what I wanted. Like, and so she's having trouble getting out of like the back mode when he had like all those things that she really wanted in someone, and she had the experience of that. How do you, because now she feels a little stuck. How do you walk someone through that if they're feeling stuck because they're like, gosh, like I had what I really wanted and I don't have that now, and to have hope that someone even better, more fit. How do they get there in their mind? And again, like super practical from there.
So let's make it really practical. The first thing on our list should be that I'm wanted. What I mean by that. Okay. Because I'm glad, because yes, he had everything that I wanted except her. So that doesn't work. Okay. Because here's the thing. That's why I always tell women that you have to be 100% certain that he's 1,000% certain of you. And any doubt that they are certain of you is a risk to your security or leads to insecurity. Because if it doesn't want you 100%, it doesn't matter what he has. It's not yours. Right? And that's an important distinction, because what happens is that we get caught up on what it is that we want. We actually almost forget what we deserve. And what we deserve, what we were created for, is somebody in all of us. Therefore, the fact that he has everything except for that he doesn't really want her reveals that he doesn't see her. So I think from a mindset perspective, to just clarify that distinction is really massively important. Now, that doesn't negate the fact that it's going to be painful. That doesn't take away that it hurts, right? So we as women need to be very masterful at seeing things for what they are, calling a duck, and when he walks away, he doesn't see you. When he doesn't see you, then he doesn't really deserve you. Yeah. Because what kind of a relationship would it be when you have to prove yourself as worthy to be seen all your life? So the question then is that what you really want, though? Yeah. And the answer is no. It doesn't matter if you can do X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 if he doesn't want. So the question I have prior to this is that how did she know that he had everything he wanted? He had everything she wanted. Was she clear about what she wanted prior to? Or was it that all of a sudden she realized, I really like this guy, and all of a sudden he shows up as everything I wanted? And here's why that's important. When we become emotionally involved, we justify what we want. When we're clear about what we want, we actually see the red flags of our standard. That because this is why it's so important to be clear about what we want, we don't want, and to create the distinctions now, because it's actually easier to make a distinction before we get emotionally involved. When there's no clarity, how do you actually create boundaries when there's no clarity? And next thing you know, you're wrapped up in a relationship emotionally, and then all of a sudden you want what that person is, but you never had decided to even have a metric, but you are now emotionally involved to justify that that's everything I want. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
It's
Mm-hmm.
an important distinction, because then you can go back and say, are you sure it's what you wanted? Because if you weren't clear about what you wanted before, then how can you be sure that's what you wanted?
That does make a lot of sense.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Mm.
So what do? We grow from this understanding of the necessary standard that needs to be created when you're single. Massively important. I cannot tell ladies enough how important it is to do that. And we kind of don't don't take it seriously. Yeah, I kind of know what I want. If it's not on paper, you don't know what you want.
Yeah.
If it's not on paper, you don't know why, because it could change, because your memory is 50% not accurate.
Yeah.
And your thoughts is also, you can persuade yourself to think one day this way, one day this way, depending on your move, especially if you have no command of your emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to understand, what is your self-image now? Because what happens when we are wounded, we need to actually rewire a new self-image of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because right now, the self-image is probably like, he doesn't want me, I'm not good enough, those labels that actually led us to that narrative. So we need to rewire that narrative. It's like, no, he wasn't the one for me, and he never really wanted me. I can't force something, and I would never be in a relationship where I have to prove myself to that person. That's really the narrative.
Yeah.
So we go back to the self-image, and then we go back to the dream, because we dream when it's the hardest to dream. Because the byproduct of dreaming is what? Hope.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually put this in gallery mode.
That's so good. So good.
Juicy.
Okay.
Stuff always gets juicy.
I love it. Let's see. How do you? Oh, okay. This was another question. How do you, and you and I kind of talked a little bit about this. I don't remember if we recorded it or not, but I think this would be super beneficial because
our phone calls should be recorded, Maria.
Yeah, they should be.
Because we go deep. Okay, go ahead, go for it.
Okay. How do you dream of a guy? Because you and I did talk about this over the phone, but I think this is going to be important for other stretch. How do you dream of a guy when you can't put a person to it because you've never experienced this, a completely new experience? And I know you talked about finding couples who model that, and I'll let you expound on that because I do think this is super important for us.
So how do I create a new inventive design, right? I have to expect that I'm going to build this massive design of a house. That's first in my mind first, but this house wasn't designed, right? How do I create something? I create from the unknown. I actually build it in my head. And that's an important logic, because we're always trying to create from some kind of model, but in order to actually be creative, we actually have to create outside of the models. And what I mean by that is that you take this little piece from that, this little piece from that, and this little piece of that, and you create your own, right?
Yeah.
So we need raw material to create. But in order to invent, we need to actually live in our imagination. That's where the inventions happen. Nobody designed this cup prior to somebody's imagination. This cup was designed. I take the glass with a wooden thing with a straw. So why that's important? Because it helps us theoretically understand the importance of living in our imagination and creating in our mind. That both activates a particular activator and actually helps us to live with the vision of the future and live in hope. That's really important. Okay. So now the second thing we need to do is that we need to now gather raw material. Because you can't create with the same just raw material. If you want to create and reinvent something, you kind of need new ideas, new thought process. And remember that when we actually acquire new thoughts, new ideas, our cells replicate in a massive rate. Novelty is like dopamine for the brain, all the good stuff. So now we can create neuroplasticity and new rewirings based on new concepts and new ideas. And I'm kind of just touching on this, and I'm going to bring this all together, I promise. So here's how it looks like. January, I don't know what this guy that's incredibly kind, that's also really athletic, that also knows how to dance salsa, that actually really loves families, that's actually really responsible. Like, I never met that person. Great. Let's imagine what that person looks like. So here's what you do. You find people that do have those qualities, kind of like a raw material. You're gathering it, right? And then you create it. You put it in your head like, oh, wow, a person that's kind, a person that's family oriented, a person that is X, Y, and Z. Because now what you're doing is that you're creating from observation, your raw material.
Yep.
So you study couples, you study women, you study men. We've always said this. You study men, women, family, children, you study your actions, their actions, reactions, and interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we ought to be students. And, I say that all the time. We ought to be students of men, of women. And that's why we ask questions and why we study, and we need to know how to study, and we study how they act, how they react, and how they interact.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can have raw materials to create that imagination from. But you need to intentionally find 5 couples, 5 men, 5 women. And one of the things I studied was women, because I studied their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to feel like they were feeling. And so I studied the way they showed up to get I reverse engineered it. I didn't have a path the way I'm teaching you now, but to me, that was important to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So do it on social media. Like, there's certain people that I follow. Find couples that you love, find men that you admire, take pieces, and you could not like parts of them, but this part of them I really like. And that's okay. Right. And you're just inventing that design in your head. And then you put that on pen and paper. Remember, if it's not in pen, it's wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Right. It's vulnerable. So just put it into pen and have fun with the journey. Right. And create that design. And then for the rest of your life, you're always observing, couples, because you're always trying to make things better. So now, in context of that kind of person that you want, that kind of relationship, you need to study how you're showing up. That's the biggest part.
Yeah.
Right. Because then, okay, here's that kind of guy, and here's this kind of guy, and he's got this. You should never demand something you have first not commanded from yourself. I'm sorry. You should never command something from someone that you have not first demanded in yourself. And what I mean by that, if you want somebody who's responsible, you better be responsible. If you want somebody who's really fun, then you better be a fun person and not negative. If you want somebody who's really hardworking, all these different things, you have to check it against your own metric and your own self-image, right? Because then you want to make sure that you're giving, right? And reciprocating the thing that you want the most.
Yeah.
Right. And it does, for some of the things that are bonuses, like I wanted somebody who was athletic, or I wanted somebody who was a great pianist, and I was not. It was sort of a bonus. It wasn't like a non-negotiable.
Sure.
Dad was a pianist. Obviously I don't need to learn a piano to find that kind of guy, but I'm talking about primarily the non-negotiable things.
Yeah. Okay. So what about, like, you're working with girls who maybe never dated like great men, so they don't even know what the metric for that would be. Where do you start with them to even, because if you have no concept of that, so you've mainly dated guys who were not great men, maybe they grew up in a home life, where their dad was not a very good man or was abusive, or, and that cycle has been the path, and they want to switch that. Where do you, obviously self-image would play into that. But where do you take that? Because they'd be like, well, I don't know what to look on social media, because I don't know.
When we've been wounded by not so good men, and we've had some history, we really have to take a step back to dating. If we really want something, because right now it's like we're risking our capacity for joy and freedom for the rest of our life when we're blinded.
Yeah.
Right. And it's too far and too big of a risk. We need to take a step back. And the first thing we need to do is that I've never dated good men before. I've always had bad relationship. We really have to say, I need to stop dating for now and do a pause and do an internal analysis of who I am. This is why the women's school, we do a self-analysis, and I need to grow myself, because I first need to grow in maturity, grow my ability to actually observe who I am before I even have the eyes to make better choices, because otherwise I would make a choice that's kind of the same choice as before, because I don't have the capacity for it. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
So, but oftentimes I get women who's just trying to change the other. Oh, then I'll get rid of that guy. I'll find another guy. But see, it doesn't matter, because their lens are the same.
Right.
So then this is why women who end up with bad men end up with the same bad vicious cycle. Why? Because if you have a habitual pattern of only seeing what you're capable of seeing, your eyes are not, open to certain things because you're not growing that level of awareness. That's why we need to grow as women first and develop before we have the capacity to make really pivotal choices. So when we're in that steep and we're just steep in anxiety, stress, or we're in a really bad relationship in the past and we've never tasted what it's like to be, admired, to be in freedom, like it's really the biggest signal to say, I need a sabbatical. And that's what I did, and I did that for almost 8 years. I do not recommend obviously 8 years, but like a month, a 2, or something where you say, this is my time to focus on where I'm depleted, where wounds I need to heal, what formation I need to grow. And you need to get a coach. You need to go, you need to get formation. And, obviously the women's school provides that, but to risk making a choice without having the capacity to choose is risking the only life we have.
That makes a lot of sense. So good. I love it.
Like, well, it's an important, distinction, right?
It is. Okay. So on the quiz, so I've had a couple people who have been around 8 or 9. So they're scaling, or 9 is scaling. 9, 10 is scaling, I think it is. I went back and looked at that. I'm forgetting what the, okay. So the thing that, like with one of the people that stood out to me was where I read on her thing where it was like, it's who she believes she is not that is holding her back. You need a coach, blah, blah. Okay. With someone who's like very close with that, but there's obviously a limiting belief. Maybe they don't even recognize what that limiting belief is. How do they get to a point of, number one, recognizing what the limiting belief is, and then like the action plan for that?
Well, I guess if I understand your question, you can't identify it just from the wholeness quiz alone. I mean, the wholeness quiz is just really a metric that helps us to begin the journey. It's a very simple starting point. So the only way to do that is to actually grow and develop our awareness, our mindset, our skill set, to have the capacity to even pinpoint where these things are that need to be, recalibrated or nourished. And I think goes back to the question prior to. So the answer is that we need to grow. And I always tell women this. I said, wherever, if you're struggling with boundaries, chances are you're struggling with self-image and mind management. If you're struggling with, finding the right guy and always end up in the relationship, it probably means that you have boundaries and self-image and mind management and, family origin issues and intimacy. What I'm trying to say is that there's never one solution. And it's never one answer. And so as women, we can either dabble into the little Band-Aid trainings, or we can really grow integratedly and holistically, so that then all our lenses are changed. It's like, it's like putting a Band-Aid on our lens or just getting a whole new glasses. Right? So to identify it is to actually have the capacity to identify it, which means that she needs to be intentionally growing. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? I think.
Yeah. So she's in the class. So she's in my class. So she is, taking those intentional first steps. And as she does, she'll be growing within that. How do, like, as a strategist, how do I help her, I guess, like hone into those as she's seeing like the areas maybe that are, okay, yeah, I whether it's that self-image, like I don't believe, there's some internal of a lack of belief that I deserve this, or as a strategist, I guess, how do I draw more of that out, whether it's from better question asking or.
So basically your question is, how do you draw or replace her self-image?
Yeah. Like how do you, because I feel like quite a few of the girls that I'm working with in this one, there's some major self-image things going on with them just from things they were saying. Is the way, like, obviously they're going in, they're watching the lessons, you dig deep into those. Are there certain questions I can ask to help them think a little bit more, certain, like,
let me ask you a question real quick. Are these women scaling?
One is scaling. The other one was like a 7 or an 8.
Okay.
The other one I think was like a 6, 7. So none of them were like super low on it, you know.
So where do you think their self-image is getting affected the most? Is it in their intimacy?
One of them is definitely intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe 2 of them actually. One of them for sure is intimacy is definitely a thing. One of them I think is probably like massive family of origin.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember, if you look at the wheel, the intimacy is connected to the family of origin. Remember that wheel?
Yes.
Right. So I think that's where we need to do a little bit of work. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
if the self-image, the first thing we need to do is that we need to design the way we show up. That's important. So that we're not living from the hormones of the past, the narrative of the past. So we need to say, who are you choosing to be? Right? Let's design you. Right? Because what's holding her back is not the woman she is, but has she designed the woman she is? So that's important. And the only way that can happen is through 2 things. She needs to wire that in her mindset, the design of the woman she's intending, and then she needs to develop the competency skills necessary to become that woman. So it's a journey. So she's not gonna overnight become, sort of free of it. Her self-image needs to be wired, and then the skill set to protect that actually needs to be. So you need to ask yourself, like, what are skills that are going to help you actually develop your self-image, so that, what's like, ask her what certain skills. Okay. And then the second thing is, what limiting belief is she wiring in her mindset? And we need to have a replacement scripts that she wires. Remember, 15 days for wiring, 66 days for hardwiring. So it really is important that we're not just sort of saying it. And I see this all the time, with the masterclass. I did all the worksheet. I'm like, no, the worksheet done is the first part. You now have the wiring part that needs to happen. So that's really massively important as a strategist to say, like what I do with my clients, I let them wire something for 3-4 weeks at a time, and they're literally dinging on their phone, ding, 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 rereading it every 3 hours, their self-image.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. How many times do you have them write it out? How many times do you have them say it? What is the actual
practice? Me, it's write, recite, repeat, retreat is our, formula. So in the morning they have to write it. And so they write it, and then they have to imagine that self-image, but throughout the day I let them read it. So in the morning, they write it. If they really want to, they can write it at night again in their index card or whichever way they write it, the journal. But throughout the day, every 3 hours, their phone dings. And there's actually there's actually a what is it called? An app that actually is for dinging for this. It's not for scripting, but it just like if you just want like gosh, I have to remember what it is. There's somebody told me about it because I told her about it. She's like, oh, Taylor, there's an app for like just like remembering constantly throughout the day.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
So yeah, I would, just wire it. Remember that it's wiring. It is not simply knowing. Knowing is not being. Being is wiring.
Yeah.
And wiring means our, being means our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions.
When you are, and this is maybe a mom to kids question on wiring, do you, like, I've seen where you have your kids write out certain scripts, and I think you said 20 times. Is there a significance to that number, or is that arbitrary?
That's just arbitrary. Some kids can only wire 10 scripts. I do 25 because that's what,
Is there a science to the number of times?
That's a great question. I actually don't know. There's a science to that writing is wiring.
Right.
There's a lot of studies that writing is writing. But I don't know actually how many. It's a good question. I don't know if there's a specific number. Yeah, I just, repetition is the key. So the more you wire it, the more you fire it, the more you fire it, the more it gets hardwired. Yeah. So, if you're reading it over and over 10 times a day, 10 times 7, I mean, it's going to wire into your brain. My worth is objective and not subject to other people's opinion of me.
Yeah.
If you do that for 15 days, that changes you. If you do that for 66 days, you're going to be so amazed that the way you show up is not determined by other people's opinion of you. I'm here to compliment, not criticize, like I compliment every woman I meet. I mean, that's really important. So for women that struggle with their self-image, whatever the replacement or the particular self-image she struggles with, whatever narrative, I'm, my worth is dependent on my perfection or whatever that is that, you create that progress over perfection. My worth is not determined on how I show up. I am objectively good. So these things that need to just be constant, and it becomes the narrative in our brain.
Okay. One more question here. I think that's all the ones I had on there.
I love questions.
For older people, I'm noticing a little bit of, and these are not clients yet, they need it so desperately. But there's a pushback because of the whole, like, I know. So I actually have 2 questions on that. One is, how do you, in a graceful way, encourage someone to, like they've had the training, but it didn't work for them back then, so it doesn't really matter if they're, like maybe, or when I get to this point, I'll do it. And it's like, well, you're not going to get to that point, but
they've had the women's school training or training?
No, but just training on like writing down your goals, visualization. So like some of those aspects of training, with that. How do you, is there a graceful script, or is there a graceful way to, because they're clearly not where they want to be, but they don't think that they need any of this, but they're stuck. Is there a way to?
So, do you feel like you're thriving? Do you feel like you're stuck? If you scale 1 to 10, do you feel like you're thriving? And then when they give me an answer, just remember, knowing isn't being. Your only metric is that you're thriving. So just remember that as you decide right now if you need it. And so let me ask you a question. What are you currently doing to continue to grow? Because if you're not continuing to grow, then there will come a time when you've reached a cap of your growth. So what I'm saying is that we're made for expansion. We're made for growth. And that's an important thing. So I would just ask them. And then I would say, if they've taken the wholeness quiz, that's important because I think it gives them a clarification. And then say, okay, can I ask you, just rate your peace of mind? 0 to 10. Are you living your dreams? 0 to 10. Are you the woman that you're choosing to be? 0 to 10. Are you free from competition? 0 to 10. You might be surprised that once you get down to that level, it's like, well, I have women are like, I think I'm really happy and I don't really feel like I need things. I'm like, that's great. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's break it down a little bit. So if I were going to decide your self-image, do you feel like you know exactly who you're choosing to be, and that the woman that you're working right now is the woman that you're trying to become 6 from now? Tell me 1 to 10. I actually don't really know. I'm not clear. So you're telling me that you are not really intentionally designing yourself? Well, I don't know. And then I'm like, well, they actually hear themselves. So health, rate to me your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. You would be so amazed. That's why, like, if I would have given the women, we would have given them the wholeness quiz without sort of, just like 10 questions, most of them will probably be scaling.
Wow.
I mean, maybe not most women, but they're not going to see, because the questions identify pain points. It's not an easy quiz to take. It's short and it's small, but it makes you look at things deeper. And even though it's a very simple and it's not a defining point, it does make you question. And that's exactly the goal of it. Is that maybe there's certain arenas in my life that I haven't considered are necessary, but I actually need to take a look at.
Right.
So I would go back into that. I would go back into the metrics, say, that's wonderful. So let's go back and dig a little bit deeper, because sometimes most women don't know where sort of they're deficient in. And, our only metric is that we're free, we're peaceful, we're joy. I always say, I'm like, light, joy, and peace.
Oh, I like that.
Light, which means that we're actually radiating.
Yeah.
and inviting people. Joy is that it's not this like just funny, it's just a perpetual gratitude. That's a really, and peace is that where our mind is at rest. We can live in the present moment and hope for the future, and we're not in constant worry.
That's beautiful. Okay. That is so good. Thank you.
You're so good. I love it. I am going to, can I cut half of this when we talk about the singles and actually maybe use that for the singles? Because it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's really good. And even make it public, and you can share it with a lot of your single ladies, because I think it's a great.
Yeah. I'm excited with when the new one comes out with that, because I think they will really, because I can tell, like, even like from our first conversation, I was like, oh, I see where we're going with this. I'm like, all right, Spears, level up, start your
You're
growth.
so open, Maria. That's really like your humility, what I think supercharges you. Because I will tell you, I'm kind of, I've known you, but in some ways I kind of am harder on you. In a way, when I talk to you, especially with men, specifically with men. And I think because, first of all, because I get protective, I think there's a little bit of a, like a little bit of a big sister thing. I'm like, no, I need her to raise the bar. I need her to be feisty. But I think that your humility is like, you're just like, oh, what can I learn? And that is like what makes you so beautiful and attractive, Maria, because of your humility, and you've like no walls, the genuineness, and it really is so beautiful. And I really just admire that about you, lady. And it's something that women can learn from, because the walls are up. We can't get in.
Yeah.
We can't.
What's fun with that is that's actually, thank you so much for saying that, because one of the things I've been working on wiring for the last like little while has been I am receptive. When I think of receptive, it's such an open posture versus like that. And it's been fun to see, because I can even feel like an internal shift with that.
Oh, there's
thank you for saying it's beautiful, because it's like, look at how
working. It's wired. It's hardwired.
It's hardwired. We are making progress.
Oh, you're making lots of progress. I mean, I didn't think that you needed it. But like a student that you are, you thought, oh, I'll even expound on that, which is even more telling. So it's a great lesson. So yes, I think it's one of my favorite words. There's a few words that I just like. Love, and receptivity is one of them. Depth is one of them. There's just words that just ring so much.
It captures.
Yeah, it just captures, admiration is one of them. I love that word. Wholeness. And there's just so many words that I think encapsulates what it means to be woman. Like nurture is one of them. And it's almost as though it's inexhaustible. There's so much layers that we can kind of glean from it. And so that's one of them, receptivity. But anyways, thank you, my friend. You are beautiful as always.
Thank you so much, love.
For the next Q&A, bring them over. I love it. It's a great conversation.
Let me tell you, every couple of weeks, you're probably going to get a list.
I know, but I think it's great. I really enjoy it. And, I don't have a list in front of me, so it's sort of impromptu. I'm sure I'll think of like answers later on, but
that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Every interaction, I feel like I come away just so fueled. So thank you.
It's always mutual. The teacher is always the one that's being taught if she has a receptive heart. That's what God designed us. So anyways, I love you. Awesome.
Love you, girl. I'll see you later. Bye.